Daniel Carter was the man everyone trusted. Melissa Carter was the woman everyone admired. Sophie Carter was the daughter with the bright future, and little Lucas Carter was the heart of their perfect home. They were the family neighbors pointed to as proof that happiness was real. Their house was filled with framed smiles, holiday decorations, and carefully planned dreams. But on one cold, silent night, that picture-perfect life turned into a crime scene that would shock an entire community. By morning, all four of them were dead inside the very home that once symbolized safety and love. What investigators uncovered in the days that followed revealed secrets buried beneath polished success, hidden debts, dangerous connections, and a betrayal so calculated it shattered the illusion forever. The Carter family lived in a peaceful suburban neighborhood where tree-lined streets and trimmed lawns created a picture of calm and safety. Their two-story white house stood at the corner of the block, with wide front windows that allowed warm sunlight to pour inside every morning. Neighbors often slowed down during evening walks to admire the neat garden beds filled with seasonal flowers. The home looked like something from a real estate magazine, carefully maintained and inviting. Daniel Carter was known as a hard-working and disciplined man. He dressed sharply every day and left for work at the same exact time each morning. As a financial advisor, he had built a reputation for being smart with money and trustworthy with clients' investments. People in the community respected him. Melissa Carter balanced the household with quiet grace. She volunteered at a local charity, organized school events, and made sure birthdays and holidays felt magical for her children. She often posted cheerful family photos online, showing smiling faces during vacations, weekend barbecues, and holiday celebrations. Sophie, their teenage daughter, excelled in school and loved photography. Lucas, the youngest, was energetic and curious, always riding his bike in the driveway or playing soccer in the yard. From the outside, they seemed deeply connected. They attended church together, hosted neighborhood gatherings, and never missed important school activities. To outsiders, the Carters represented stability and success. Their lives appeared carefully arranged and full of love. No one could see the quiet tension that sometimes lingered beneath the surface, hidden behind polished smiles and perfectly staged photographs. As months passed, small changes began to settle quietly into the Carter household. They were not dramatic enough to alarm anyone, but they were noticeable to those who lived inside the home. Daniel's once steady routine started to shift. He began staying up late in his home office, the faint glow of his computer screen visible long after midnight. Papers piled up on his desk, and unopened envelopes were stacked neatly in drawers instead of being sorted right away. His phone buzzed constantly, and he often stepped outside to take calls in private. His business, once stable and profitable, had entered dangerous territory. Risky investments had collapsed during a sudden market downturn, wiping out large portions of client funds. Instead of admitting the losses, Daniel attempted to recover them with even riskier decisions. Each failed move deep in the hole. The pressure grew heavier with every passing week. Bills that were once paid without thought were now delayed. Mortgage statements arrived with urgent reminders printed in bold red ink. Melissa sensed something was wrong, though she did not know the full truth. Daniel became distant, distracted, and easily irritated. He avoided conversations about finances and brushed off questions with forced calmness. Meanwhile, Melissa found comfort in spending more time volunteering at the charity organization. She stayed out longer in the evenings, returning home with a tired expression that suggested more than simple exhaustion. The children felt the change in subtle ways. Family dinners became quieter. Vacations were postponed without clear explanations. Laughter that once filled the house seemed to fade. The home still looked perfect from the outside, but inside, uncertainty had begun to spread like a slow crack in glass, fragile and ready to shatter. The night everything ended began like any other weekday. The street outside the Carter home was calm, with porch lights glowing softly and distant sounds of televisions flickering through open windows. Inside the house, the evening routine moved forward in its usual order. The kitchen was cleaned, Lights were turned off one by one, and the doors were locked before midnight. Nothing appeared unusual to anyone watching from the outside. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, the Carter home grew still. No loud noises disturbed the peace. No neighbors reported shouting or the sound of breaking glass. The house stood quiet beneath the pale glow of the streetlights. Hours passed without interruption. The next morning, small signs began to raise concern. Sophie did not arrive at school, which was unusual for someone with perfect attendance. Lucas missed a scheduled soccer practice. Melissa failed to show up for a charity event she had helped organize for weeks. Daniel did not respond to emails from clients who were already anxious about their investments. By late afternoon, worry turned into action. A neighbor contacted authorities requesting a welfare check. Police officers arrived and knocked repeatedly, but there was no answer. After entering the home, they were met with a scene that immediately confirmed something was terribly wrong. Inside, all 4 members of the Carter family were found dead. The house showed no signs of forced entry. Furniture remained in place. Nothing appeared stolen or disturbed. It was as if time had suddenly stopped within those walls. Within hours, flashing police lights illuminated the quiet street. News reporters gathered outside the once-admired home. The perfect family had been destroyed overnight, leaving behind shock, confusion, and a haunting silence. In the early stages of the investigation, detectives searched for the most logical explanation. With no signs of forced entry and no evidence of a violent struggle in the main living areas, attention quickly turned inward. The theory of a murder-suicide began to circulate quietly among investigators. Financial records discovered in Daniel's office seemed to support that possibility. Bank statements revealed overwhelming debt, unpaid loans, and evidence that several clients had recently threatened legal action. The pressure he had been under was far worse than anyone in the community had known. At first glance, it appeared to fit a tragic pattern seen in other cases involving financial ruin. A respected professional loses control of his career, becomes consumed by fear of exposure, and makes a desperate decision. Detectives considered the idea that Daniel might have drugged his family before ending their lives, and then his own. It was a painful but simple explanation. However, as forensic results returned, the case became less straightforward. Toxicology reports confirmed the presence of strong sedatives in all 4 victims, but the timing raised concerns. The levels found in Daniel's system were nearly identical to those in the others, suggesting he had not administered the drugs differently. Additionally, there was no immediate physical evidence linking him to the direct cause of death. The positioning of the bodies also created doubt. The scene appeared staged in a way that felt too deliberate, almost controlled. Small details did not align with a sudden emotional breakdown. Detectives began to question whether someone else had been present that night. The initial theory started to weaken. What first seemed like a tragic act of despair was slowly transforming into something far more calculated and unsettling. As investigators widened their search beyond Daniel's financial troubles, they began examining Melissa's recent activities. What they uncovered added a new and unexpected layer to the case. 6 months before the murders, Melissa had taken out a substantial life insurance policy. The amount was far larger than typical for a family in their financial position. More surprising was the name listed as the sole beneficiary. It was not Daniel, nor any close relative. It was Adrian Wolf, a wealthy real estate developer known for making generous donations to local charities. Adrian's connection to Melissa came through the organization where she volunteered. Records showed that he had attended several fundraising events over the past year. Photographs placed them in the same rooms at multiple gatherings. On the surface, their association appeared professional and tied to charitable work. However, financial documents told a more complicated story. Investigators discovered private transfers between Melissa and accounts connected to Adrian's companies. The amounts were significant and spaced irregularly over several months. The payments were not labeled as charity contributions or business transactions. They were personal. Phone records added further concern. Melissa and Adrian had communicated frequently, often late at night. While the content of their conversations was not immediately available, the pattern suggested a relationship that extended beyond formal meetings. This discovery shifted the investigation sharply. The possibility of an affair became a central focus. Detectives began to consider whether jealousy, manipulation, or financial gain could have played a role in the murders. The once clear image of a struggling husband acting alone grew more uncertain. The Carter family story was no longer just about hidden debt. It now involved secrecy, wealth, and a powerful outsider whose name had quietly entered their lives long before tragedy struck. Detectives turned their attention to the surrounding neighborhood, hoping that technology might reveal what witnesses could not. Several homes on the street were equipped with modern security systems. Officers collected hours of surveillance footage from doorbell cameras and driveway monitors. Most of the recordings showed nothing unusual. Cars passing by, neighbors returning home, the quiet rhythm of an ordinary evening. Then one camera captured something that changed the direction of the case. Late on the night of the murders, a dark SUV entered the street and parked several houses away from the Carter residence. The vehicle's headlights turned off, but it remained there for more than an hour. No one exited visibly on camera, yet the timing matched the estimated window of death. Around 2 a.m., the SUV's lights flickered back on before it slowly drove away. Traffic records traced the vehicle's registration to a company owned by Adrian Wolf. Investigators obtained location data from his phone, which placed him near the Carter neighborhood that same night. While this did not prove he entered the house, it contradicted his earlier claim that he had been at home. Forensic specialists returned to the Carter residence for a more detailed examination. Inside the kitchen, on a polished counter that had been wiped clean, they discovered a faint partial fingerprint. It did not belong to any member of the family. After processing the print through national databases, it produced a match. The fingerprint belonged to Adrian Wolf. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. His vehicle, his phone location, and now his fingerprint connected him directly to the home. The investigation, once uncertain and divided, began narrowing toward a single suspect whose presence on that quiet street was no longer explainable as coincidence. As investigators prepared to move forward with charges against Adrian Wolf, a final search of the Carter home uncovered something that complicated the case even further. Hidden behind a row of legal textbooks in Daniel's office was a small wall safe that had not been noticed during earlier searches. Inside were neatly organized folders containing financial documents, contracts, and printed email exchanges. What those papers revealed shifted the focus once again. The documents showed that Daniel had been secretly operating a fraudulent investment scheme for nearly a year. He had created fake account statements for several wealthy clients, moving their money into unstable ventures without consent. Losses had mounted quickly, and rather than confess, he had falsified reports to hide the damage. Among the files were detailed notes about Adrian Wolf's business holdings and personal transactions. Even more disturbing were copies of emails between Daniel and Adrian. The messages showed that Daniel had discovered the connection between Melissa and Adrian months earlier. Instead of confronting it publicly, he used it as leverage. He demanded large payments in exchange for silence, threatening to expose both the alleged affair and certain questionable real estate dealings connected to Adrian's company. Bank transfers confirmed that Adrian had sent substantial sums to accounts controlled by Daniel. However, those payments had stopped shortly before the murders. Records indicated increasing urgency in Daniel's final written communications, suggesting that he had been demanding even more money. The financial pressure was closing in from every direction. Lawsuits from clients, collapsing investments, and a blackmail arrangement that had grown unstable. The case was no longer just about jealousy or revenge. It had become a web of deception, greed, and desperation, with each secret tightening the trap around everyone involved. With all the evidence assembled, investigators carefully reconstructed the final hours of the Carter family. Phone records, security footage, forensic timelines, and financial data created a clear sequence of events. Adrian Wolf had arrived in the neighborhood late that night after weeks of growing tension. The blackmail payments had drained millions from his accounts, and Daniel's demands had recently increased. Exposure would have destroyed Adrian's business empire and public reputation. Evidence suggested that Adrian had been allowed into the house without force. There were no signs of struggle near the entrance, and the security system had been manually disarmed from inside. Toxicology reports confirmed that sedatives were placed into drinks consumed earlier in the evening. Investigators believe the drugs were administered gradually to avoid suspicion. Once the family became unconscious, the killings were carried out methodically. Forensic analysis showed that the scene had been arranged carefully afterward to resemble a tragic act committed by Daniel. Certain objects were positioned to support that theory, but subtle inconsistencies gave it away. Adrian underestimated the depth of modern forensic science. The fingerprint in the kitchen, the SUV footage, and the financial trail formed an unbreakable chain of evidence. When confronted with the full weight of the investigation, Adrian's carefully constructed image collapsed. Prosecutors presented a clear motive: silence the blackmail, eliminate the risk, and protect his fortune. The jury found him guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. The Carter home was eventually sold, its walls repainted and floors replaced. To outsiders, it looked new again. But the story of what happened inside remained a permanent scar on the community, a chilling reminder that behind perfect appearances, hidden darkness can quietly grow until it explodes without warning.